Okay, so today we're going to talk about rhombus and square. I'm going to start with rhombus. Now remember, rhombus is also a parallelogram, so all the attributes of a parallelogram. Let's go ahead and mark those. I know that opposite sides are going to be parallel, so I'm going to mark that. Okay. In a rhombus, all four sides are congruent. So that means that all four sides will have the same little tick mark. Opposite sides are congruent and parallel. And on top of that, all four sides are the same measure. So that makes it a little bit easy. Okay, so that takes care of sides. And then opposite angles. Opposite angles are going to be congruent, just like a regular parallelogram. So I'm going to mark those. And I'm going to mark these. Okay? So that takes care of number 3 under parallelogram up at the top. Don't forget that your consecutive interior angles are going to add to 180. So I'm going to color these. I'm going to do pink and orange just because that's what I have here. And any combination of pink plus orange is 180. Does everybody see that? These two would be 180. Those would be 180, those would be 180, those would be 180. Any combination of the pink and the orange would be 180 because consecutive angles are supplementary. So I've got this part, I've got this part, I've got this part, I've got this part. I have all of that taken care of. Now I'm going to add in my diagonals. So I'm going to draw one diagonal there. One diagonal here. So we know that the diagonals bisect each other. Okay. The diagonals are also perpendicular, which means they meet at a what? They meet at 90-degree angle. So that's a 90-degree angle, that's 90-degree angle, that's 90-degree angle, that's 90-degree angle. That's kind of overkill, but some of you need that. So the diagonals are perpendicular, they meet at a 90-degree angle, and the diagonals bisect each other. So I'm going to put 2 tick marks here and here because those segments are congruent. And then these 2 segments are congruent. And I actually want to go up to our previous things because I want to clarify some congruency segments. I think I left a little tick mark off a couple places. So these 4 have 1 tick mark. They are all congruent. These 2 are congruent. They have 2 tick marks. These 2 are congruent. They have 3 tick marks. If you go back up here really fast, these 2 sides are congruent and I put 1 tick mark, and then these 2 were congruent and I put 2 tick marks, and then I said that the diagonals bisected each other and they were congruent, but here's what I did. I should have put 3 tick marks here because these diagonal pieces are not the same as those. And if I just have 1 tick mark, then that's what it looks like. So I need to make a correction on what I said yesterday. I just forgot to clarify that. And then I think I need to do that up here as well. So we have 1 and 1. We have 2 and 2. So then these can be 3 and 3. and then these other two can be 4 and 4. So I apologize that I wasn't clear on that, but I wanted to just kind of go over that one more time. All right, so this is a rhombus. It has all the same as a parallelogram up at the top of my paper. I don't need to rewrite it. I just need to go and look at it. But then also the 4 sides are congruent to each other, and then the 90-degree angles meet in the middle. Okay? The diagonals of a rhombus are not congruent. Let's write this down. Not congruent. Not like a rectangle. So I just want to clarify that. I think that is everything for rhombus. So now I'd like to go to square. Let's go to square. Okay. A square has all of the characteristics of a parallelogram, and it has all of the attributes from a rhombus, and all of the attributes of a rectangle. So we're going to go fill all that in. On a rhombus, all 4 sides are congruent, and the diagonals are perpendicular, means you have those 90-degree angles. Okay, so there's that. Okay, all 4 angles are right angles, which means they are 90 degrees. These are the outer angles, okay, around the perimeter. And I think there's one more. It got left off somehow by this publisher. The diagonals are what? The diagonals are congruent. Okay, so we're going to mark up our square. We're just going to go through all of the things. So, first of all, I know that all 4 sides are congruent. I know that opposite sides are parallel. Does that take care of my sides? Is that everything I could say about sides? They're congruent and they're parallel. So the congruent part is rhombus. The parallel pieces is parallelogram. Okay, so then we have 90-degree angles here. So all 4 angles are right angles. They're 90 degrees. Okay, so that takes care of my opposite angles are congruent. The opposite ones are congruent, and the consecutive ones are supplementary. So any combination of pink and orange would be 180. Okay, so that takes care of my perimeter of my shape, all the sides and angles. Would you agree? Did I leave anything out? Okay, so now let's draw our diagonals. Okay, so here's our diagonals. Now what do we know about the diagonals of a rectangle? Well, I know that they are, first of all, a parallelogram means they're going to bisect each other, so that's a midpoint. But a rectangle, they are congruent, so these are congruent pieces, but this one is the same as that one, so these will also be the same measure. Everybody with me so far? And then, what do we know about the angles on the inside? They're all 90 degrees. So I'm going to real quick, and then I'll be done. I'm going to real quick make sure everything is on here correctly. Okay, Opposite sides are parallel, and I have that notated. Opposite sides are congruent. That is notated. And all four sides are also congruent. So I have that piece there. And I have this here. Okay, opposite angles are congruent. And all four angles are 90 degrees. And consecutive angles are supplementary. So I have all of that. And then finally, the diagonals. They bisect each other, so that's a midpoint. These are congruent diagonals. And they bisect each other, so they all have the same little half measure. And then the interior angles are all 90 degrees. So I have everything notated on my square. And this time I made sure that my little tick marks were marked correctly. Any questions so far about square and rhombus? Yes?
Just to clarify, the diagonals are not congruent, right?
On a square they are.
Or on a rhombus.
On a rhombus they are not. They're 90 degrees. They're not congruent. So I have 2 here, right? 2 tick marks here. And then I have 3 tick marks here and here. A rectangle, they are congruent. And since a square is a combination of those, that's why the square has the perpendicular and the congruency for the diagonals. Okay, any other questions for me to clarify? Okay, so your job today, we did properties of parallelograms and rectangles yesterday. So next is, we're going to do, what's today, the 9th? Okay, rhombus, and again, you have all the things there. So right here, you've got your rhombus, more rhombus over here, and then I want you to do squares. So your job before you walk in the door on Monday is to have everything done through page 6. Page 1 through 6, all. So you did some of it yesterday, you're doing some of it today, and then you have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to wrap it up. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video. That way I can post it. This is your job. You're going to work in your teams, and if none of you in your teams can come to a unanimous agreement, please call me over and I will settle whatever needs to be answered.